Well, I've come to look today at the Rue de Pré trading estate. There it is. Now, I don't know, there's probably about 60 or so businesses here by the look of it. The thing about this estate is, this is like a history of the island plans, because they were brought in about the same time as this estate was first dreamed up, so I suppose it was probably zoned, because as we know, planners love to zone things. And so it was about 1960s, middle of the 60s. Island plans, the Barrett plan, 1960s. So this is where the planning system today that we have basically found form. This was one of the, I think this is the building, I don't know, but I think this was one of the few buildings here which actually had any architectural merit. I don't know how much of it was, but the RCA built a building here. They were one of the last attempts at having a manufacturing business of any sort in Jersey, and they built this, which is attempts to be a bit architectural. It was actually designed, I don't know who designed it. It became Lebrun's Bakery. It failed. The RCA, Jersey wasn't a suitable place. You couldn't run. It was a high-tech business, the sort of thing that Jersey would have loved to have kept, but it wasn't viable. So it became a bakery, Lebrun's, and then I think Lord Matthews, who owned the Express newspaper, a very wealthy man, he put his son in charge of Lebrun's Bakery in the late 70s, I think, and his son was really a sort of he'd tried to be a trainer of racehorses, hadn't got on very well with that, so he came to Lebrun's. Eventually Lebrun's closed down. I don't know what else happened to it, but anyway, the JP took it over as a factory to print JPs and other newspapers in a deal with Kodak. So it was opened as a sort of experiment. I don't know if that's been a successful experiment, but they print all the newspapers for the Channel Islands except those horrible lefty-wing newspapers like the Guardian, which they don't print that. So you have to buy your Guardian elsewhere or get it online. I don't know what other ones they don't print, but they've got. So that's what they do, but they were supposed to be, when they opened it, they said it's going to be an experiment or showroom so that we can have people come to see how it works. I don't know what Simandis Food Services, I've got no idea whether that was part of the Lebrun's, I don't know, I'm a bit confused about all that. But we're going to have a look at this, the totality of this estate, because this ought to be a warning to us about the planning process. This is wholly created under the island plans, the best architectural brains in the island, and this basically it's tin sheds we've got down here, as you'd expect for a trading estate, and it's a bit like if somebody dumps rubbish in a field. And it attracts more rubbish, doesn't it? And that's what this place is like. It's much improved, I must say, since they've attempted to sort the car parking out, because it was dreadful here before, cars everywhere. Now it's restricted. Now, one aspect about this estate, which I don't know about, is obviously people do live here. Now, when it originally opened, it was strictly business. It was not supposed to be for housing accommodation at all. So I don't know how many, obviously they used to have some people who used to stay on the site as caretakers on sites, security. Whether it's extended beyond that, I don't know, but it would be very interesting to know how many people live here. So it was strictly trading when they weren't allowed to retail when it originally conceived. It was strictly wholesale manufacturing, industrial activities, and warehouses. They weren't supposed to have retail customers. Now we're going to have a little wander around, I think. This is a Sunday, by the way. I've come on a Sunday purposely so that I can see the buildings and the roads, and I can wander around reasonably freely. It was an old... When I came to Jersey in 1960s, they were just starting to build this place. It was very marshy land. I don't know if it was used for farming, but it was very boggy. And when they were digging foundations, they used to fill up with water, very high water table. And there was lots of little creatures swimming about in the foundations. I never worked out quite what they were. But there we are, we're going to have a little wander around. Yeah, it's just some more buildings. That sort of... They used to sell, Normans used to sell a lot of those heather brown bricks. That was, that building there is phony Rooney as we used to call it. That sort of, that stuff. It's a strange sort of brick. But you can see it's got that sort of, Palos, they're big, they're building supplies, of course. They've got a big presence here now. I don't know what that building is, that little building is. Now, how much of the accommodation upstairs in these buildings is living, I've no idea. I've got absolutely no idea. But I'd like to know, because see, it's the building suppliers. And there's another one there, Quantum, that's another building, supplies to the building industry, or building sector. And what I think about this, these buildings have been here from 1960 onwards, so most of them are past their sell-by date. So a lot of this will have to be redeveloped. Obviously most of these buildings, I suspect, don't have very adequate thermal insulation and other things. I don't know how they would, how they're equipped for the future. I don't know how. I don't know what we could do is one of those little things in the camera in the sky, just to take an aerial shot with a thermal camera on board to see what heat loss comes out. Of course, today it's a hot day, lovely day. SGB, of course, building industry, mostly, not only building. But so it's got that sort of a feel, like if you go to see an American film and they're all having a car chase and they almost seem to be going around industrial places like this. It's like the international industrial standard. Obviously it can be compared not very favourably with somewhere like Venice, which obviously was a great commercial centre in its day, the centre of the world as far as commerce was concerned. But the building and the builders then were concerned about beauty, making beautiful buildings. Maybe there are lots of ugly buildings and sheds in Venice, I don't know. But it's not a priority when you're putting up industrial buildings. It seems to be designed to the lowest standard. And of course they have a limited life. Strange enough, there's a place where vehicles are repaired. The actual frontage of that building has been made a bit interesting. The use of colour, the lettering, it's actually it's an attempt at presenting something a little bit more attractive, I think, obviously, because they do body repairs for cars, and that's what their business is, making them look proper again. There's Pentagon again, the classic tin shed for Pentagon. Okay. We're sort of conditioned, aren't we? We don't expect a high standard of building for industrial uses, do we? Why don't we, though? Why don't we? Why should it be any less? Indeed, why should it? Oops, a bit dizzy. It's got a very large road, and it used to be, before they put the parking restrictions, that used to be congested, very congested. So they have improved that, but on a busy day, weekday, it's still very congested. Now, of course, this industrial activity, in the past, a lot of that used to take place in St Helier, in Jersey context. The merchants' sheds, potato warehouses, the main crop of the island, which was the thing that was mostly manufactured, or tomatoes. They were brought into town and packaged to a large extent. If they weren't packaged on the farm, they were packaged, weighed and distributed from places along the Esplanade and along Norman's, overlooking the harbour, all that area. And strangely enough, even though they're very utilitarian buildings, they weren't ugly, were they? They had a scale to them. And I don't know where all the people lived then, but of course in Venice they had things like, the word ghetto apparently derives from Venice, because they had an island where they used to put the unsavoury iron workers with all their fumes on this little island, and it became known as ghetto. And that's where the word ghetto is, and that's what they're turning St Helier into now. They're turning it, ironically, into a housing ghetto, aren't they? They're cramming as many houses in they can. And there's a great shortage of workshops in town where the people are, small businesses that they could operate from small businesses from. And obviously parking vehicles in town, it's never been resolved. Where do you park your commercial vehicle? The white van man. So these are aspects of planning which have never really been grasped. We've had all these island plans. We've had planners, architects, all sorts of designers at work who should know better, but this, all their concerted efforts ever since the 1960s, 50 years plus, 60 years, and this is what we've got. And this is, they're now producing yet the latest island plan. And what reason have we got to expect they'll do anything better? I don't think they will do anything better, because it isn't about that. They just like to zone areas. That'll be a housing zone, that'll be an industrial zone, which used to be, back in the 60s, used to be marked with a big black blob on the planning and zoning maps, which was, I always thought was very appropriate. Anyway, let's go on. I haven't got much good to say, so if you want something cheerful to say, don't listen to me. I can't remember what the land was like here back in the 60s before they built, but I presume beyond the fence is pretty much what it was like. Now, I don't know, the land, you go from this road, it's obviously a drop down into that land, so I would think that that land was fairly boggy, but I don't suppose whether John Young and his planners have rezoned that likely field for anything further, I don't know. I expect people have looked at it plenty of times. But obviously the environmental lobby, it's already wild. They want to rewild a lot of land in Jersey. This looks like an ideal candidate. I wonder if it's being zoned for rewilding. And we can bring back some old species long since gone. Again, a lot of Pentagon. You see, strange, I've always thought it's rather odd that you can have very large wagons. Wagons don't have to get planning permission, do they? Why is that? Why don't vehicles have to get planning permission? Now, storing timber on the road, I presume it's private road, I don't know. I don't know, I look at those gates there. I presume Pentagon sell paint, but those gates certainly need of a bit of TLC to make them look, you know, make them look as though they're a little bit presentable, wouldn't it? You know, so much of the same. Really, it's a piece of land given over to commerce, and it shows you what commerce will do if you leave it unregulated. You know, look, rubble, vehicles. What are we supposed to do? I'm a bit perplexed, because obviously they used to build buildings. They had building supplies companies back in the heyday when they were growing potatoes, and they had all those potato merchants' sheds along the front in St Helier. Presumably the system worked okay then, but something's lost, isn't it? You put planners and architects and designers in control, and something is lost, isn't it? Something very substantial. This interests me especially, Rue Grelier, because the Greliers were Huguenots. And so many of the Huguenots that came to settle in the Channel Islands and elsewhere were involved in making things, manufacturers. Now, the Greliers, I don't know which Grelier they had in mind when they put that post up there, but there was a Grelier who came to Jersey from Guernsey. He'd been a parfumier. He went bust. He was perfumes. But Francis Grelier, father and son, they were shipbuilders around about 1800, and one of them, the senior, was also in charge of the customs shipping register. They didn't want a shipping register here because the merchants wanted to do things, a little clandestine activity going on, as always. And the Lieutenant Governor had to appoint somebody, and Grelier did it on a part-time basis. But there he is, and if you see, even you can be romantic about old sailing ships, but he built at least one chasse-marée, as he called it, and he entered it into his own registry book. And even the handwriting, the entry, is a piece of art. It's just superb, the handwriting. And that's sort of what this place is all about now, isn't it? It's that little joie de vivre. This is just brutalist commerce, isn't it? It isn't about beauty, adding beauty, buildings that you would be wanting to keep for another 200 years, is it? Somebody will want them to be demolished these as soon as they can, I would think. And how they fit in with climate change and the activities that go on here, how they fit in with climate change, these are all questions that we need to ask. It isn't just about, keeping a few brown cows in the fields, is it? This is commerce. And this is the zone for certain types of activities. They've got a zone for the finance industry. We've got a zone for housing. And that's why I'm especially interested to know what amount of living accommodation is there in this industrial zone. because obviously the industrial zone that they've created around the docks is really quite hideous. You know, it doesn't matter. There's a bit of contrast here, look. I mean, these horrible, unnecessary part of industrial areas, security, horrible fences. But at the perimeter of this site, just down there, you see you've got trees, growth, naturalness. Now there's a barrier to that, keeping that out. It's not in here, is it? You see, there's a few little trees, rather sad-looking trees. And also in these sort of areas, look, it doesn't matter, it's an industrial area. If you drop rubbish on the floor, who cares? What does it matter if it looks untidy and tatty, uncared for, unloved? See, that doesn't matter, does it? What does it matter? And at the other perimeter of the site, what have we got there? Another backdrop of trees a long way away. You got a few rather miserable looking trees there in the site. But look at it. This wonderful boulevard of tarmac and ugly buildings, ugly sheds. It's, I don't know. Why am I so... And it's going to get worse, isn't it? We're going to get worse. Will the island plan? I mean, they're going to have a 3-year island plan, an interim plan. John Young was chief executive at the planning office years ago. He wrote another plan, or he put his name, he contributed to it. So he knows what the system is. Climate change, planting, wilding of land. Oh, I don't know. This will carry on. I suppose they'll replace, because they've now got a commercial use. It'll be very difficult to unzone them, to make it a more pleasant area. But the planners love to have one activity all in the same place, so that you kill an area, make it an industrial zone. It doesn't really matter how unpleasant it looks. That suits the planners. Well, here we are back at the beginning. This is the main entrance off the road. This is what greets you when you come down. I was asked if there is any, what there is in the way of amenities. Somewhere, I haven't managed to see it today, but there is a little cafe here. I don't know. Obviously 60 or so businesses. I don't know how many people work here. And they've got visitors, obviously. A little cafe. It does exist here. I couldn't see it today. I don't know whether it's a sit-down cafe or just a little takeaway kiosk. I don't know what it is. The other thing I was asked about was public toilets. Are there any public toilets here? You know, and of course, if you start doing public toilets, I have to raise the question, if there are they accessible? I couldn't find any today. Are they accessible for people with their various needs, disabilities and so on? If there aren't any public toilets, why aren't there any public toilets? And whose responsibility is it, or would it be, to provide them? So, I don't know. It's not a good advert for planning, and we're stuck into this system of having island plans, and this is, in my view, this is what you get if you're not careful. So, I'm not a fan of the island plan process. I think it succeeds to some extent in some places, but it fails in many regards.